is I have put a thermostat bypass delete in this 6L80. This is 2018, and I want to show you how slow or how fast this truck warms up. All right, guys, it is 7 o'clock, 6:56. It is -2 degrees. I have a thermostat bypass delete in my truck for the 6L80. I'm going to start my truck up, and we are going to see how fast this warms up to 50 degrees. So here we go. We start the truck up. I'm going to see what the transmission temperature is. Transmission temperature says 9 degrees. The temperature outside is -2. Now I'm going to tell you, this transmission temperature, when I checked it the other day, was close to 9 degrees also, and it was a little bit warmer outside than this. So let's see what happens here while this truck is warming up. I have a lot of people that think that when they put the thermostat bypass delete in their vehicle, that what they're going to end up with is, when it's cold outside, they live up north, and when it's cold outside, the transmission will not warm up fast enough, and it will start causing damage with the transmission. Now we are already at 16 degrees, and what I'm going to show you is we're still at -2. It is 6:58. I hope that my camera will continue to do what it's supposed to do. It is really cold in this truck, and I'm hoping that my camera does not malfunction on me being too cold. We'll just do what we can here and see what happens. What I have got is another vehicle that is at my shop that is all original equipment, and I am going to shoot a video on it. It is a Tahoe, and we are going to shoot a video on it and see what we come up with on it. I just turned my GoPro on, but I'm not going to be able to video with it because my GoPro is acting up already. Oh, my bad. It's just too dark in the truck. It's not the GoPro, it's just too dark in the truck. So anyway, okay, let's sit here and see when this thing gets up to 50 degrees. We are 3 minutes in. I'm at 21 degrees. This truck has not been run for probably been sitting out here about 15 hours in this cold weather, and I'm at 23 degrees. We're still at -2, 6:59. Now what I want to tell you guys is my theory on the bypass, the thermostat bypass. I think that your transmission fluid warms up faster going through the radiator and then back to the transmission. At this point, your fans are not running, so the coolant is at a temperature to where it would warm the transmission fluid up. Your engine is going to heat up faster than your transmission, and therefore your transmission would be actually warming up off of the coolant that is in the radiator. As the engine warms up and your thermostat opens up on the engine, it would dump the hot coolant into the radiator, and it would be warming your transmission up faster than if it was just coming out of the transmission straight back into the transmission. There is nothing there to warm the transmission up. If it's coming straight out of the transmission and back into the transmission, I would think it would just be circulating cold transmission fluid. Now I know the torque converter is going to warm up, but the torque converter really doesn't do a whole lot until you pull the vehicle down into gear and you actually start causing friction. So when you're just sitting there running, there should not be any friction, or not much friction, in the transmission, and therefore the heat is going to be lower. So what I was thinking was that, you know, and I was raised thinking this way, and it's hard for me to get away from it, is that, you know, back in, I think it was the early 60s, I want to say like 61 to 63, when Hayden first introduced the fluid going through the radiator and back to the transmission. When he introduced that, his idea, his thought process was that, you know, this will heat the transmission up in the winter. That's the reason you would start your car, let it warm up before you tuck off in it, and it would cool the transmission down once you got going. And we could do away, at that point, you know, you could do away with the air-cooled transmission, which I don't know if you've ever seen one, but it's a really strange looking system where it has fins on the side of the torque converter, and as the torque converter spins, it would pull the air into the converter and cool the converter down. The bad part about that was there was no way to heat the converter or the fluid up. You would constantly be cooling it down, and really, really cold weather, you would have there would be a struggle to get the transmission up to operating temperature. So when they introduced the cooling system that went through the radiator, then it was actually a kind of a plus on both ends. You could actually warm your transmission up through the coolant, and then you could cool your transmission down through the coolant. So it went, and now, and what we're dealing with right here is a 2014 to 2018 situation where they put the thermostat. If you go to the 2019, those guys, well, you just look at that system sometime on a 2019 and newer. I'm not going to try to explain it, but you look at that system and you're probably going to think this is not a very good system for warming my transmission up. So I think that they're, you know, I think that the engineers with GM really was not thinking in terms of warming this transmission up at all. I think that they was thinking that they wanted to control the top end temperature and keep it at that 190, 195, and I don't know why, but that's where it seems like the where the changes were really made. So but anyway, we are about 7 minutes in. We're still at -2 on the temperature outside, and we are 7:04. So we are about 7 to 8 minutes in, and we are at 36 degrees. Now what we're going to do is, like I said, you know, at about 50 degrees, you could pull this truck down into gear and you could safely drive it, you know, and not hurt your transmission. And the reason I say that is, you know, in the summer, when your nights are getting down to, say, if your nights get down to 70 degrees or 60 degrees, your transmission is probably, you know, going to be around that same temperature as the outside. So you're probably, your fluid's going to be about 50 or 60, and, you know, you jump in it in the summer and take right off without letting your vehicle warm up. So one thing I want to watch is the coolant temperature gauge you see on the truck right here. We want to watch the coolant temperature gauge also, because, you know, once that thermostat opens up and you see that thermostat temperature start rising, and once that thermostat opens up, then you know that your transmission at that point will probably start warming up a little faster. So I'm interested in that. We'll just sit here and watch this for a little bit. We are 9 minutes in. It is cold in this truck. I tell you guys, I am sitting here you know, I could be sitting in the house beside the stove, but instead I have a lot of people ask me what happens in the wintertime with these if you take the thermostat bypass, if you take that out, you know, and you delete that, you know, if you change that over and put a SureCool in it or something like that. They want to know what goes on with your transmission temperature, you know. So I came out here 7 o'clock in the morning, -2 degrees, sitting here shivering, and you know, want to give you that information. I want you to know exactly what's going to happen in this cold weather if you you know, if you have this going on. Now, I haven't changed this transmission fluid in probably, I'm going to say 2 years. So I'm probably looking at about, I don't drive much, I'm going to say in 2 years, maybe 15,000 miles is all I'll put on a vehicle, maybe 7,000 a year, maybe. And so this fluid is a little bit old. It's not brand new fluid or anything like that. I just want to let you know that. When I bought the truck, the original equipment was on it, and just as soon as I bought it, I seen my temperatures getting up, and I pulled all that out of there. I don't think that you know, I wanted to switch it over. I don't think that I hurt the converter before I got to it, but truthfully, just looking underneath of the truck, I feel like this transmission was rebuilt, repaired, or something before I got my hands on it. So this is a 2018 Chevy, and this is the Silverado, and 5.3 6L80. And I'm not going to pull it down in gear. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not giving the accelerator. As you can see, we are just sitting at a dead idle. We're going to sit here until we get this temperature up to 50. I may even run it up a little higher. I don't think it'll go probably much more sitting here idling. It may not go much more than, you know, 60 or 70 degrees. It may kind of stay there once we get to that point, but that's where we want to get it to before we pull this thing down in gear and head off on our merry way. So we are at -2 degrees still outside, and it is 7:08. So we are close to 12 minutes in. My fingers are starting to go numb. I'm starting to feel the cold creep in on me. I do have the heater going. But until that thermostat does something or something happens here, this engine warms up a little more. We're not, you know, I'm sitting out here in the cold, so it's just blowing cold air. But I got to talking, I kind of forgot that it was on, and I'm going to reach over here and turn it off so it'll quit blowing that cold air. And we are at 45 degrees on our transmission fluid temperature. Once again, we are -2, 7:09. So we're at 45 degrees. Truthfully, I would say that you could safely pull this truck down into gear and take off and not hurt anything in your transmission at 45 degrees. But we're just going to sit here and see exactly how long it takes to hit that 50. I don't know, I might sit here at that 60 degree mark. If you guys don't like listening to me and you want to go to the end of the video and see what happened at the end, or what temperature we got to at what time, I'm just sitting here with the camera pointed straight at my engine thermostat. What I'm really wanting to do is I'm wanting to see my coolant temperature start raising. You know, once my coolant temperature starts raising, you know, that theory of mine that the transmission fluid going through that cooler and you know, and being touched by that coolant on the you know, once it gets up there to where the thermostat would open, then, you know, I want to see how fast it will raise the temperature on the truck, because we've been here for, you know, my truck is at, we're at 14 minutes on here. Let's look, -2, 7-Eleven, and we're at 48 degrees, but my coolant has never started raising, but my transmission temperature seems to be going up pretty good. I mean, this is pretty good, you know, -2, and you let your transmission warm up for 15 minutes and you're at 50 degrees. I mean, you're at operating, you know, you can operate this transmission with it at 50 degrees and not have any issues at all. You're not going to cause yourself any problems. Operating temperature on transmission, guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about this. The fluids that are designed for your transmission are designed to operate in the temperature. Let me try to reword this. Say that you have a transmission that runs 180 degrees, then you would try to find a fluid company that could develop you a fluid that would best work between 160 and 200 degrees. That would be what you would be looking for. That's where your goal would be. So when you talk about transmission fluids and transmissions been at operating temperatures, what we are looking at mostly is where does that transmission fluid operate at its best temperature. If your truck is running, you know, 190 and the fluid can handle a 190, I think that's where GM had a little bit of trouble, is because the Deck 6 just did not really like that 190, 195 degree temperature, and sometimes 210. I've had guys to comment and say, hey, my truck's running 210. You know, my transmission fluid is running 210. And when you think about that, you know, your transmission running at 210, if you've got a fluid that can handle that 210, then the fluid's probably not going to break down on you. And if the fluid doesn't break down, then more than likely, you know, your transmission could operate properly with it being that hot, because the fluid, you know, works at that temperature. But what you have is when your fluid is rated at a, say, like I said earlier, you know, between a 150 and a 190, then you don't want your transmission running 200 all the time or consistently, because then that fluid would not keep up with that temperature. It would start breaking down. It just couldn't handle it. It's just, and I think that's where GM kind of made a little bit of a mistake. I think they didn't realize how quick that their transmission fluid was going to break down, so they introduced us to two different fluids. We started out with the Mobil 1 black label, and then they changed it to the Mobil 1 blue label is what they wanted in them, and all the big companies are going to that. You know, I have guys on here, hey, you're not using the recommended fluid, but if you look at all the big companies, and I'm talking about Jasper Reman Transmissions and a lot of the other big companies out there, they will tell you that they want the Mobil 1 full synthetic LVHP in these transmissions, in these 6L80s, 6L90s. And that tells you that when you look over at the other transmissions that's on the markets, the 6T70s and the Acadias and the Traverses, that'll tell you that, you know, if this fluid is working good on these 6L80s, you know, the 6T70s are failing too in the exact same way. Most of them are failing with a shutter, they're failing with a overheated converter, and I have switched over several years ago. I switched over to Mobil 1 in all my 6T70s, and people, you know, they kind of fall apart when I say that, but man, I have just had great luck out of that Mobil 1 full synthetic. It's just the way to go. So anyway, I know there's a lot of guys out there that like other fluids, and as long as those fluids can handle the temperatures and things that the way that these transmissions are putting out, you know, the 200 degrees, then that's all right. But anyway, we are at 57 degrees, and we are still at -2. It's cold out here, and we are at 716. So We are about 18, 19 minutes into this thing. Our temperature on our transmission is well above being able to pull it down in gear and safely drive down the highway and not worry about this transmission being too cold to operate. So 57, I'm going to let it hit 60, and then we're going to see what happens from here. But my truck, as you can see up there, my coolant temperature has jumped up there. It looks like about 170. When this hits 60 degrees, I am going to shut this operation down, and we are going to call it that. You know, your transmission is definitely at a temperature where that it will operate. I'm going to pull it down in gear and see if that 59 degrees jumps anymore, just to be curious about this. I just pulled it down into drive. Oh, look at there, popped up to 61 there when we pull it down into drive, and then it went right back down to 59. But anyway, let's see what happens here. Yeah, jumped back up to 61 when I pulled it down into reverse. So we're good. I mean, you would be able to take off in your vehicle after, say, about 15 minutes. I believe 15 minutes we was at 50 degrees or something like that. So let your truck warm up for about 15 minutes, and you should be good to go. This is Code Man's Auto, and please subscribe.